I'm just thinking, who do you think's the strongest between you and me?
Well, me, obviously. I like the small things come in big packages.
Oh, well, we'll try it, because I think it's me.
Right.
Who thinks it's Janice is the strongest? Who thinks it's me? Right, there's only one way to prove this. We're going to do a tug of war. Oh, good shooting.
Well, we're not doing the best of three. I'll let me away with that. But today, we're going to see how God proved his strength, how God proved his might and his power. You'll know that we've started and we're doing about the story of Moses. And you probably remember last week, Moses had lots and lots of excuses, lots of reasons why he didn't want to do what God asked him to do. And one by one, God removed all of his excuses. And so eventually, Moses did go, with Aaron's help, went to speak to the people. And he told the people about God's rescue plan, and they believed him and they worshipped God. So now this week, Moses has to be really brave, do what God really wanted him to do, and with Aaron's help, he goes to speak to Pharaoh. And he tells Pharaoh, you know, I've come today because God has been speaking to me. God has told me that he is going to let all of the people go away from you cruel Egyptians. God is going to give all his people, the Israelites, a new and better land where there's room for all of them, men, women, children, and all of their flocks. There's going to be enough grazing for the animals, and there's going to be enough food for everyone. So God has sent me here today, Pharaoh, to tell you, you must let God's people go. Well, Pharaoh didn't believe anything that Moses said. He didn't know who this God was. He didn't believe in him anyway, even if he did know. And he said, I just think you're trying to be lazy. The people just don't want to do any work, and you're trying to get me to let them go away. No, I'm not going to let them go. And in fact, I'm going to make them work even harder. So the people came and complained to Moses. And then Moses went and complained to God. And he said, God, you told me, you promised that you were going to rescue your people. But all that's happened is Pharaoh's got angry. Pharaoh's making them work even harder. And you haven't rescued us at all. But God said, wait, trust me. I will prove my strength, my power, and I will show my might. Pharaoh might not believe right away, but one day he will. And all the Egyptians will see that I am God and I am Lord of all. But when Moses asked Pharaoh to let his people go, Pharaoh said no. And God said,
I'm going to send.
Slick as ever.
I'm going to send a plague of blood, and there'll be rivers and lakes and ponds and streams will just be yucky blood. And even the pots and the jars in your house will be blood, and you won't be able to get a drink. And all the fish died, and it was smelly. And Pharaoh turned and went into his palace, and he didn't care.
So, 7 days later, God sent another plague. This time it was a plague of frogs. Now, not just one tiny pink frog hopping about the garden. There were thousands of frogs. They were everywhere. They were in the streets, they were in their homes, they were downstairs, they were upstairs, they were in the bedrooms. And after church, that's clear what that's like. There were frogs everywhere. You couldn't move for frogs. This time, Pharaoh called Moses. And he said, Moses, please pray to God. Ask him to take all these horrible frogs away. Then I'll let the people go. So Moses prayed. The frogs disappeared. Pharaoh looked around. There wasn't a frog in sight. Did he keep his promise? No, he didn't.
So next, God sent a plague of gnats. And these were horrible, nasty little insects, like midges really. And there were swarms of them, and they were everywhere. And anywhere you went in the fields or when you were doing your work, these were everywhere, and they were biting and stinging, and they were horrible. And Pharaoh's friend said to him, surely this is God punishing you. But Pharaoh would not listen.
So next, God sent a plague of flies. But this time, the flies only affected the Egyptians. The Israelites didn't have a single fly in their houses, but the Egyptians' houses were full of flies. They were everywhere. They were downstairs, upstairs, in the kitchen, in the pots, in the pans, on the food, on the people. They were just everywhere. The whole ground and floors of all their houses were covered in flies. Once again, Pharaoh came to Moses and he said, Moses, please pray to God. Ask him to take these flies away, and I promise I will let your people go. Moses said, well, this time you better keep your promise. So once again, Moses prayed. The flies disappeared. Did Pharaoh keep his promise? No.
So next, Moses warned Pharaoh and said, if you continue to refuse, God's going to strike down all your livestock, all your cattle and your horses and your camels. And the next day the officials went to check, and all the Egyptian animals were dead. But the Israelites, all their animals were fine. But still Pharaoh refused.
So God sent a plague of boils, nasty blisters, sores all over their skin. But did Pharaoh listen? No.
And next, there was hail. Giant, huge hailstones. And the crops were flattened. But still Pharaoh said, no.
My God told Moses, I'm showing all these signs to prove my strength, to prove my power to the Egyptians, but also as a sign to the Israelites, so that you can also be sure that I am God, I am Lord of all. Now Moses said to Pharaoh, if you continue to refuse to let God's people go, I'm going to send a plague of locusts. Pharaoh's officials pleaded with him. They said, Pharaoh, can't you see? Our livestock is dead. Our crops are being flattened by the hail. Our land is ruined. Now there's going to be locusts, and they will strip the crops of everything that is left. Now Pharaoh said, okay, but just the men. Only the men can go. Well, that's not what God said, so God sent his plague of locusts. Pharaoh realized that he had done wrong, and he said to Moses, please forgive me, and ask your God to forgive me too. I'm so sorry. Oh yeah, I can tell him to take these sticky locusts away as well. So once again, Moses prayed. The locusts disappeared. There wasn't a trace of any of them left. Was Pharaoh really sorry? Did he let the people go? No.
So now, God sent darkness. Darker than you could ever imagine. And the Egyptians couldn't see a thing. And the Israelites, they could see everything. That wasn't a problem to them. But the Egyptians couldn't do anything, couldn't go anywhere. It was just too dark. And Pharaoh said, okay, take the men and the women, but leave your flocks. And Moses said, no way, that's not what God has said. And Pharaoh said, get out of my sight, don't come back and ask me again, and if I see you again, I'm going to kill you.
Well, I'll never be back then, Moses said. But God said to Moses, I have one more plea. One more thing I'm going to do to prove my power and my strength. The next thing that I do, Pharaoh will listen. But that is the story for next week. So next week we'll find out what else God had in mind. And will Pharaoh really listen this time? Will he change his mind? Will he let the people go? Well, like I said, that's for next week. So what can we learn from this week? Well, Pharaoh had a message directly from God. God said, let my people go. First of all, Pharaoh said no. It's a bad idea to say no to God. But then Pharaoh tried to make a deal. He tried to do it a little bit. He tried to say, well, okay, I'll just let the men go. That wasn't what God wanted. God was not pleased. Then he said, well, okay, let the men and the women go. But again, that's not what God wanted. God had given him a direct order to let all his people go. And there's something that we can learn from that. Because God has a rescue plan for us. And God has one thing that we need to do to be rescued from our lives of sin. God has promised us a new life free of sin, and a perfect life in heaven. But there's only one way that we can get there, and that's by asking Jesus into our hearts, to live for him, Some people don't believe in God. Some people just say, no, not for me, just like Pharaoh did. Some people say, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll just be very good. I'll be very, very good, and then God will let me go to heaven. But that isn't God's plan. That's not what God said. Some people say, well, I'll go to church every week, and I'll read my Bible now and again, and if I remember, I'll say my prayers. But again, that's not what God said. God said, there's one way to get to heaven, and it's only through his Son Jesus, who died for us. That's what we can learn from this story today. So now we're going to sing. We're going to sing, our God is so big, so strong and so mighty. There's nothing our God cannot do. Do you remember the actions? I hope you do, because I'll be copying you.
Our God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. The mountains are his, the rivers are his, the stars are his handiwork too. Our God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. Yeah. Our God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. Our God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. The mountains are his, the rivers are his, the stars are his handiwork too. Our God is so big, strong and so mighty, there's nothing that he cannot do. It's okay, we don't have to sing in a place.